Nuclear energy generates institutional revenue, yet capital volatility and extended construction cycles deter private investment structurally. Over a 40-year life cycle, nuclear power is efficient, but early debt accumulation pressures investors' risk and delays revenue significantly. Fuel efficiency reduces operational costs, yet delayed construction cycles defer cash flow, increasing governance and financing complexity. This analysis shows economic realities, comparing nuclear, natural gas, and renewables under institutional investment and governance pressures. Baseload generation demands steady revenue, yet intermittent renewables require auxiliary capacity, limiting systemic grid reliability effectively. Wind emits 11 grams CO2 per kilowatt-hour, yet relying on gas backup inflates emissions and operational volatility. France emits 32 grams CO2 per kilowatt-hour with nuclear, yet Germany emits 318 grams using wind. Capital allocation favors gas because lower costs and faster construction cycles reduce exposure to financial volatility significantly. Nuclear projects cost $6 billion per thousand megawatts, yet early negative cash flow cycles constrain institutional allocation structurally. Debt service during 6-year nuclear construction delays revenue, increasing systemic financial pressure and risk-adjusted investment metrics materially. Early repayment of multi-billion-dollar loans creates cumulative debt, showing why nuclear struggles despite operational efficiency advantages. Operating efficiency is unmatched, yet deferred revenue elevates perceived volatility in institutional investment evaluations materially. Utilities prioritize assets with predictable revenue, relegating nuclear to lower priority despite fuel economics and thermal efficiency advantages. Risk-adjusted models show gas outperforms nuclear in short-term returns, shifting institutional investment under governance pressures. Long-term profitability cannot offset early structural volatility, showing systemic economic challenges for large-scale nuclear deployment consistently. Year 6 nuclear construction, including Diablo Canyon, increases capital pressure, while early debt raises institutional risk and financial exposure. Regulatory approvals require compliance layers, raising structural costs and delaying revenue, which increases institutional investor risk. Licensing uncertainty and long construction cycles increase financing complexity, raising systemic volatility in institutional investment. Gas plants with $1 billion capex finish in 2 years, producing revenue immediately, while nuclear stays in early negative cash flow. Baseload assets like Diablo Canyon need operational oversight and seismic retrofits, raising structural expenditure without generating early revenue. Extended operation mandates delay break-even, causing institutional investors to favor assets with shorter payback and predictable governance. Capital-intensive safety upgrades increase operational expenditure, raising debt service ratios and reducing return on investment clarity. Grid reliability requirements further raise systemic costs, particularly in regions with high renewable penetration and intermittent supply. LCOE calculations show solar and wind assets achieve lower per-unit costs due to faster deployment and reduced financial volatility. Nuclear's long-term fuel efficiency is unmatched, yet early-stage capital constraints dominate institutional risk-adjusted investment decisions. Operational efficiency cannot offset early financing pressures, forcing utilities to lower priority of nuclear projects compared to gas assets. Debt service cycles increase systemic volatility, with cumulative interest exceeding annual operating revenues during early construction years. Political governance cycles intersect with financing obligations, discouraging investment in nuclear capacity despite favorable energy output metrics. Historical cost overruns and extended construction timelines at plants like Diablo Canyon reinforce cautious institutional allocation. Nuclear remains structurally disadvantaged in capital allocation despite potential long-term operational profitability and fuel efficiency. Nuclear efficiency per fuel unit surpasses gas, yet financial exposure delays institutional revenue realization materially. Extended construction horizons create cumulative debt service obligations, raising structural risk and reducing asset attractiveness for investors. Capital-intensive regulatory compliance with safety upgrades and seismic retrofits compounds early economic pressure on project cash flow. Uranium pellet energy density shows operational advantage, yet delayed revenue deferral dominates institutional risk calculations. Technical fuel efficiency reduces marginal costs, yet extended capital lock-in increases early-stage structural volatility for investors. Grid operators prioritize predictable revenue, elevating gas and renewables over nuclear in institutional allocation matrices. Transmission losses and variable pricing increase systemic risk for nuclear, intensifying perceived volatility in early-stage financial models. LCOE and bulk pricing mechanisms partially offset operational volatility, yet cannot neutralize cumulative construction debt. Institutional allocation favors assets with shorter deployment to revenue cycles, reinforcing nuclear underperformance in capital flows. Debt accumulation and delayed cash flow reduce investor appetite, limiting support for extended nuclear infrastructure deployment strategies. Early-stage negative margins create systemic volatility, requiring enhanced risk-adjusted discounting for institutional investment portfolios. Regulatory uncertainty and governance frameworks amplify risk, shaping nuclear capital allocation relative to conventional and renewable assets. Political cycles intersect with extended construction, increasing volatility and discouraging investment in nuclear infrastructure projects. Extended operational and compliance costs affect institutional allocation, reinforcing preference for assets with predictable short-term revenue. Systemic economic pressures maintain nuclear's disadvantage, despite technical efficiency and potential long-term operational profitability. Even existing nuclear plants face closure risk when modernization costs exceed projected operational revenue frameworks significantly. Diablo Canyon illustrates operational longevity intersecting with capital-intensive retrofits, creating governance and financial complexity. Extended operational approval delays cash flow recovery, increasing systemic volatility and reinforcing investor risk aversion. Renewable deployment speed outpaces nuclear construction, shifting institutional allocation priorities in energy capital markets. Grid reliability requires flexible baseload generation, emphasizing structural integration of dispatchable assets in portfolio management. Small modular nuclear designs propose capital reduction, yet structural and regulatory compliance sustain systemic financial pressure. Dispatchable reactor mechanisms enhance grid resilience, while debt service and governance burdens persist during early operational cycles. Regulatory oversight increases structural costs, significantly affecting capital allocation and systemic investor confidence over time. Public perception affects institutional prioritization, increasing renewable investment over nuclear despite operational efficiency advantages. Cumulative debt and long timelines reinforce conservative allocation, prioritizing assets with predictable revenue realization. Investment flow dynamics favor faster deploying assets, with lower capital exposure and reduced financial volatility for institutional portfolios. Historical overruns and delayed project timelines demonstrate systemic economic pressure on cautious institutional portfolio management. Carbon reduction potential, while notable, does not outweigh early-stage structural risk in investment allocation decisions. Consequently, nuclear remains economically constrained, with governance and capital mechanisms limiting portfolio inclusion. Strategic deployment requires balancing technical efficiency with systemic financial and regulatory constraints to achieve grid integration objectives. Future nuclear designs aim to reconcile capital intensity with grid governance requirements, enhancing institutional confidence. Small modular reactors propose reduced structural cost, with accelerated revenue realization, mitigating systemic financial volatility significantly. Cost parity with gas and renewables requires innovation in financing and governance structures, ensuring capital efficiency. Investor confidence relies on demonstrable early revenue, with manageable debt service obligations to justify institutional allocation. Policy alignment with market incentives ensures structural deployment strategies, successfully achieving systemic energy objectives efficiently. Enhanced policymaker and investor education improves decision-making, supporting capital-intensive energy infrastructure projects. Technical literacy enhances governance of complex nuclear assets, reducing uncertainty in portfolio risk assessments materially. Strategic energy portfolios balance cost, reliability, safety, and environmental impact, emphasizing efficiency and risk mitigation. Proper nuclear integration complements renewables, reducing grid volatility and enhancing systemic energy capacity and resilience. Governance frameworks must overcome short-term capital bias to realize nuclear's revenue and operational advantages effectively. Modular, dispatchable reactors represent systemic innovation in capital efficiency, significantly enhancing energy delivery reliability. Financing uncertainty remains a central constraint, substantially affecting institutional confidence in nuclear deployment strategies. Competition from gas and renewables imposes high performance and strict risk thresholds, constraining nuclear economic feasibility substantially. Long-term strategic planning defines capital allocation for nuclear, within energy marketplaces dominated by faster deploying assets. Ultimately, Nuclear's systemic contribution depends on capital, governance alignment, and integration with broader energy strategy portfolios effectively.